The authorities in Los Angeles have been giving more details about their investigation into the deaths of the actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, in a surprising twist that adds even more mystery to an already sad story. Gene Hackman's 91-year-old mother-in-law has now been sentenced, causing shock, confusion, and a lot of questions. She was once seen as a quiet woman in the background, but now her name is at the center of growing trouble. How did an old woman already struggling with memory loss end up caught in a case this serious? This isn't just a final farewell. It's a cold end to a story that won't fade away. The silence is broken, and what comes next may change everything. Join us in this video as we discuss the details. Gene Hackman's mother-in-law allegedly faces sentence after the tragic discovery of Arakawa, who was 65, and Hackman, 95, found dead in their Santa Fe home. Back in February, there was a response from Yoshi Feaster, the mother-in-law of the Oscar-winning actor Feaster, obviously, shaken by the sudden loss, made a strong and urgent appeal to the court. She wanted the court to take quick action to ensure the couple's privacy during such a difficult time. Court documents, which have been made available to people, show that Feaster asked the court to block the release of any photos or videos that might have been taken of her late daughter and son-in-law. She explained in her request that releasing these images would cause her a magnitude of trauma as she tried to cope with the loss of her loved ones. In a statement, Feaster explained, "I respectfully ask this court to allow me the right to grieve in peace. I believe that I have a constitutional right to avoid seeing images of my daughter's house, her dead body, her husband's dead body, and the body of their dog." Her words were filled with sadness and pain as she continued, "The public display of my daughter's death is an ordeal no parent should ever have to face." Feaster's plea was emotional, as she further explained how difficult it would be for her to see or hear the images and videos of her daughter and son-in-law. After they had passed, she said no reasonable person could avoid seeing or hearing these images. "I would be forced to face my daughter's final days over and over again. And this is something I do not want to go through." Feaster's statement went on to highlight how important it is for society to show respect, not just for the deceased, but also for the families who are left behind to mourn. She asked for understanding from those around her, saying society should show respect not only for those who have passed away, but also for the families who must continue living with the grief of their loss in the days that followed. The deaths of Hackman and Arakawa. Autopsy reports came to light. These reports show that Arakawa had passed away from hantavirus, a virus that likely took her life several days before her husband's death. The couple's dog, a Kelpie mix named Xena, was also found dead inside the home. It was believed that the dog had died from lack of water and food. A sad and tragic end for the beloved pet. After Feaster's heartfelt plea to the court, a judge in New Mexico carefully considered her request on Monday. The judge made a ruling. It was decided that certain materials, including photos, videos, and audio recordings related to the deaths of Arakawa and Hackman, could be released to the public. However, the court made it clear that these materials could only be made available as long as the bodies of the deceased were not clearly shown in the images or videos. While the judge's decision did allow for some public release of the materials, it also ensured that the couple's privacy would be protected in a way that respected the wishes of their family, particularly Feaster, who had made such a heartfelt and emotional plea. The result of this case shows the balance that must always be set between public access to information and the respect for the mourning families of those involved in such hard situations, Feaster's plea to protect her family's privacy could be seen as more than just grief-driven. She might have been trying to protect her family's image from media attention or future scandal that is not needed. If the court suspects any other motive, such as controlling the story or hiding damaging details, Feaster could face consequences like obstruction of justice, however, given the emotional nature of her request. It's more likely she would face a mild sentence, if any, as her actions seem rooted in personal loss. Rather than criminal intent reports, indicate that before the tragedy occurred, Betsy Arakawa had not been in touch with her mother for several months. This prompts the question, what kind of relationship does Betsy Arakawa have with her mother? Stay tuned for more. The unspoken relationship between Betsy Arakawa and Yoshi Feaster. Yoshi Feaster was born in Honolulu sometime not long after the war ended. Her early life wasn't easy. Her father, a fisherman who had come from Japan, didn't smile much. He believed in hard work, respect, and never showing weakness in his house. Feelings weren't talked about. If you were sad, you stayed quiet. If you were tired, you worked anyway. Yoshi learned that early on. She learned to keep things inside, to stay quiet when she wanted to cry, and to act like nothing bothered her even when it did. That way of living followed her into adulthood. By the time she was a young woman, she had gotten so used to hiding what she felt that it just became part of who she was when she met Ronald Feaster, a man in the Navy. She saw something in him. Maybe it was a way out. Not just from her father's house, but from everything she had known. She married him and moved into a new kind of life, a military life. She was neat, polite, and always presentable. She smiled when she was supposed to keep the house tidy and played the part of the quiet, loyal wife. They had one child, a daughter named Betsy Yoshi. Was never mean to Betsy in a way people could see she didn't hit or scream. But she had other ways. If Betsy messed up, she wouldn't yell. She would just stop talking for days sometimes. If Betsy got a good grade, Yoshi didn't say good job. She would just nod and say something like, "You could have done better." Nothing was ever quite enough. Betsy learned quickly that love from her mother came with strings. She had to be perfect to earn it. As Betsy grew older, things didn't get easier between them. Yoshi didn't let her date. She didn't like the idea of her going far away for school. She wanted Betsy to stay close, to be a proper daughter, to one day care for her the way she had done. But Betsy had different dreams. She didn't say much at first, but she started looking for work out of state. She got a job offer at a music store in California, and she only told her mother the day before she moved to Yoshi. That was a deep wound. Not just because her daughter was leaving, but because she hadn't been told. It felt like a rejection of everything she'd tried to be from. That day on, something between them shifted for good. It is alleged that the two women did not share a very close bond, and this left pain that never went away. But as we dig deeper into Yoshi's past, one question is raised. How deep is this wound? Let's find out the alleged deep wound that never healed. After Betsy left, Yoshi allegedly wrote her letters, lots of them. The tone was always the same reminders of how much she had sacrificed, how many nights she had stayed up with her as a child, how she gave up her own chances in life to raise her. They weren't loving letters. They were full of guilt. They said, in many ways, you owe me years past. Betsy built a new life in California. She met Gene Hackman, a man quite a bit older than her, and well known from movies. When Yoshi found out she wasn't happy, she didn't say so out loud, not right away. But inside she was furious. She didn't trust him. She thought he would take Betsy away for good, And maybe in her eyes he did. Betsy and Gene got married. In 1991, Yoshi didn't go. She told people it was because she wasn't feeling well, but others say she just refused. From that moment on, Yoshi kept her distance. She stayed in Hawaii and rarely visited, but she never stopped watching from afar when her husband Ronald died. Yoshi hoped it would change things. Maybe Betsy would come back to care for her, but she didn't. She sent money instead, paid for helpers called. Often still, Yoshi didn't see that as love to her. It was cold distant. She didn't want money. She wanted Betsy under her roof again by the early 2020s. Things began to change. Yoshi started visiting more. She stayed longer each time. At first it seemed harmless, but slowly, her visits became more intense. She paid attention to everything in the house, the artwork, the medicine, even the mail. Sometimes she stayed for weeks, even if she hadn't been invited for that long. She would watch Betsy and Gene quietly, but she never seemed relaxed, always alert, always observing during one dinner party. A friend said Yoshi allegedly scolded Betsy for how she served rice. She said, "You're forgetting your roots." She smiled as she said it, but there was no kindness in her tone. Another time, she criticized Betsy for not taking Gene's last name, officially calling it arrogant. Betsy began opening up to friends. She said she wasn't afraid of her mother in the way people usually mean. But emotionally, yes, she said. She'll never forgive me for building a life without her. She believed her mother saw her as something to be owned. Then just before the terrible night, a caregiver heard Yoshi muttering something while looking at an old family photo. She allegedly said quietly, "She doesn't get to leave me again after that." Everything unraveled. What happened inside the house where Betsy and Gene died is still unclear. No one saw it happen. There were no security cameras, no witnesses, but slowly police began to piece things together. Bit by bit, they looked at phone records, security footage from nearby traffic cams, timelines, and every bit of physical evidence. Each detail started to build a story, and when the pieces came together, they pointed to something that had been growing for years, quietly unnoticed and in the shadows of love. But what happens when the desire for privacy clashes with the public's demand for access, especially after a life has ended? Keep watching for more. The Hackman estates fight against public disclosure. Gene Hackman's estate is making an argument in court to keep videos private. The attorney for the Hackman estate said in his opening statement, "Please the court, Your Honor. This case is about a celebrity couple who lived in very private lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. They took great pains to stay out of the public light. They lived in a private gated community. They lived very quietly in Santa Fe, and unfortunately, they died a very tragic death. They would not want to have their publicity privacy invaded by having the tragic test exploited by the press. This case raises issues of right to privacy and potential security issues. For the estate, Mr. and Mrs. Hackman had an expectation on the right of publicity during their lifetimes and after their death. They had a right to control their names, their likeness, and their image during their life. And the estate had the right to control their names, likeness, and images after their deaths. The Hackman controlled access to their home. During their lifetime, the Hackmans never conducted interviews in their home and never provided access to the press for their home by releasing the video cams and investigated material to the public. The sheriff's office will be undermining that. Control exercised by them during their life, and the estate's right following their deaths. The disclosure of the videos is simply another way of circumventing the control the estate should retain, as the Hackman did during their lifetime. The request for the video cam is nothing more than a backdoor exposure to the Hackman's lifestyle that could not be attained by the press. During their lifetime, the petitioner has pending 2 probates, and under the probate code, she has 3 months to conduct an inventory of the estate by releasing the video cams of the Hackman's home. The state will make public an inventory of the home before the personal representative has time to conduct such an inventory. And further, since the probate code does not require the publication of an inventory, the release of the video cams will undermine the private probate process under New Mexico law, and in fact violate the provisions of the probate code by the publication of the estate's POP. Pro-inventory by publishing the video, Cam's petitioner is thus seeking 2 determinations: a declaration that the estates of Gene and Betsy Arakawa Hackman have a right of publicity to protect the name, likeness, and image of Gene and Betsy Hackman. Also a declaration that Gene Hackman and Betsy Hackman families have a constitutional right to privacy. The essence of this matter is that petitioner seeks a determination as to whether the estate's right to and the family's right to privacy shall be infringed upon by releasing the sensitive items pursuant to the Mexico HIPAA statute. HIPAA is a sunshine law intended to disclose misconduct. No misconduct has been expressed in this matter. This is about transparency and government action, but it is not open-ended and does not allow the public open access to all government documents and material. There's a right to privacy and a constitutional right to control the publicity of the states. The public does not have an open-ended right to exploit the material for personal gain, and in violation of the privacy rights of the Hackman estate. In particular, there simply is no legitimate government purpose for releasing this material. At this time, a preliminary injunction is the only proper remedy in this matter. If the requested videos, photos, and cam records are released, the estate has no assurance of how the material will be used with Gene Hackman's incredible success in Hollywood. He built a fortune, worth millions. But with his and his wife's unexpected passing, one big question remains: who will inherit his wealth, and what complications could arise? Let's find out the uncertainty of Gene Hackman's fortune. There is still a lot of talk about what will finally happen to the $80 million that Gene Hackman earned over his long and successful career in Hollywood, which spread through an amazing 40 years. Many people are curious and thinking about who will finally receive this large wealth. The details surrounding this situation have become even more complicated due to the unexpected order of events leading up to Gene Hackman's passing. According to records in the year 2005, Gene Hackman prepared a legal document commonly known as a will that outlined what should happen to his money and property in the event of his passing. This document clearly says that his wife, Betsy Arakawa, would be the only person to take everything he owned at the time of his death. This meant that if he were to pass away, first everything he had worked for and gathered over the years would go only to her. However, something unexpected happened that changed everything. Betsy Arakawa, Gene Hackman's wife, sadly passed away. Just a few days before he did this, event completely altered the way the will would be carried out. Reports from media sources, including The Hollywood Reporter, have stated that in Betsy Arakawa's own will, she had made arrangements for her assets according to what has been reported. Her will stated that in the event that Gene Hackman passed away before her, any remaining money that she had would go into a charitable trust. This trust was designed to provide support and assistance to the local community. This situation has led to a great deal of uncertainty regarding what will happen to Gene Hackman's fortune. Now that Betsy passed away before him, Another complication is that multiple media sources have reported that Gene Hackman's adult children were not mentioned as beneficiaries in his will. If this is true, then they were not legally designated to inherit his money. This has raised further questions about whether they will have any access to the wealth he left behind, or if it will all go to charity, as originally planned in Betsy's will, to help clear this hard issue. Legal expert Tia Smith, an attorney who focuses on estate planning, shared some important details about how these kinds of cases usually work. Explained that although this case seems rare, because it involves a well-known Hollywood actor, situations like this actually happen more often than people might think. When a person passes away, their assets must be distributed. According to legal processes, and sometimes unexpected situations arise that make things complicated, according to Smith. The key to preventing confusion about inheritance is to have a well-thought-out estate plan in place. She pointed out that it does not matter whether someone has a small amount of money or a massive fortune. Everyone needs a plan for what will happen to their belongings when they pass away. Even when people make careful plans, problems can still arise. As seen in this case with Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, with so much uncertainty surrounding Gene Hackman's fortune, what legal challenges and family dynamics could influence the final outcome of his estate? Keep watching for more details. Legal complexities and the role of heirs. One of the biggest factors in this case is the timing of their deaths. Because Betsy passed away first, it changed the way the inheritance process worked. Smith explained that it is likely that both Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa had what is known as a pour-over will. A pour-over will is a legal document that works alongside a trust. It makes sure that anything a person owns at the time of their passing is moved into the trust, even if it was not originally included. This type of legal arrangement is often used so that a person's assets can be managed according to the rules of the trust, rather than being decided through regular legal processes. Many trusts also contain something called a survivorship clause. This clause states that if the person set to inherit the assets does not outlive the original owner by a certain amount of time, they are treated as if they had passed away. First in this case, since Betsy Hackman passed away, just days before Gene the son, rules of the trust will now determine what happens to his money. If other beneficiaries were listed in the trust, then they would be next in line to inherit the money. However, if no additional people were named, the law, in the state where they lived, would decide how the assets should be distributed. Another important factor in this case is Gene Hackman's 3 adult children. They recently spoke during a court hearing, expressing concerns about private details of their parents' deaths being shared with the public. Although they were reportedly not named as beneficiaries in the will, they are still considered his legal heirs, which means they are recognized by law as his closest living relatives. Smith explained that even if they were not included in the will as legal heirs, they still have rights under the law. When a person passes away, their next of kin are typically notified about the legal process of settling the estate, even if they were not originally set to inherit anything. They have the right to be part of the legal proceedings. In some cases, heirs can also challenge the will if they believe they should receive a portion of the estate, if they feel they have a legitimate claim to their father's fortune. They can take legal action to fight for their share of the money. Whether or not they succeed depends on the specific details of the case and the strength of their argument in court. One of the questions that often comes up in cases like this is whether the closeness of the relationship between family members plays a role in determining who inherits money. In other words, does it matter how much time Gene Hackman spent with his children, or how strong their bond was? According to Smith, the answer is usually no. The law is not designed to consider personal relationships when deciding who receives an inheritance. Instead, it follows clear legal guidelines that determine how assets should be divided if Gene Hackman had wanted to leave his money to someone other than his children. He would have needed to state that clearly in writing. If he did not do so, then the state would apply its own rules to divide the estate. Another major question is how strong these inheritance laws are. Every state has its own laws regarding wills and trusts, and the rules can vary from place to place. If Gene and Betsy wanted their money to go to charity instead of their children, they would have needed to provide strong legal documentation to support that decision. If the charity wants to claim the inheritance, it would need to go to court and present evidence showing that Gene and Betsy intended for the money to go to them at the same time. If Gene's children want to claim the inheritance, they also have the right to go to court and argue that they should receive a share of the estate. Ultimately, if there is no clear legal proof that Gene and Betsy wanted their money to go somewhere else, Gene Hackman's children still have a legal right to claim it as his closest living relatives. The outcome will depend on what the court decides, based on the evidence presented. After all the legal complexities and uncertainties surrounding the estate, one can't help but wonder what clues did those closest to them notice before the tragedy unfolded to learn more. Keep watching, unraveling the mystery of Betsy Arakawa's absence and the couple's tragic fate. Feaster, who is now 91 years old and currently lives in Hawaii, had gotten used to hearing from her daughter regularly, usually once a month. That pattern of calls was something she could rely on. But over time, things started to feel a bit unusual. Arakawa's long silence became something to worry about, according to Keiko, the woman who has been working as Feaster's housekeeper and has known her for a long time. The silence from Betsy was not normal. Betsy had not been in touch with her mother for quite a while. Keiko said in an interview, with the Daily Mail, she normally gave her mother a call every month, or at least every 2 months. The last time she actually picked up the phone and spoke with her mom was back in October. After that, there was just nothing. We started asking ourselves what's going on, and why hasn't she called Feaster, who has been dealing with the challenges of dementia for some time now. Was informed about her daughter's passing by the police in New Mexico. However, due to her health condition, she wasn't able to remember the news for long. Her memory isn't what it used to be, and things slip away from her mind quickly. Now she actually talked to an officer from New Mexico not too long ago. Keiko explained, but because of the dementia, she doesn't remember. The memory's just gone. It's heartbreaking, I really feel for her. Keiko added softly. She was very emotional and extremely upset when she heard. But now it's like she's back to how she usually is. Her mood has leveled out. Again, meanwhile, the authorities are still trying to figure out exactly when the couple, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, were last seen alive, or last spoken to by anyone. People who knew them well, especially friends and longtime neighbors in Santa Fe, remembered the couple as being very close. They were described as inseparable by those who had spent time with them. Daniel and Barbara Lenehan, who lived nearby, along with their son Aaron, were deeply shocked by the news of the couple's sudden deaths. People magazines shared their reactions. He was getting very old. Barbara, who is now 75, said. Reflecting on Gene Hackman's age, she pointed out that Hackman had just turned 95 on January 30th. We were trying to get ourselves mentally ready for the fact that Gene might pass away soon. But even so, we were completely caught off guard. We didn't see this coming at all. Aaron Lenehan, who is now 38 years old, shared his own memories and feelings about the couple's relationship. They were honestly one of the closest couples I've ever known. He said he also talked about how both Gene and Betsy were incredibly thoughtful. People they gave of themselves, often they were both so generous and kind-hearted. He added Hackman had taught him how to paint something he still remembered fondly. Meanwhile, Arakiwa, who was known for her talent as a classical pianist, would sometimes perform during small gatherings with friends, bringing music into their lives. They really seemed like true partners in every sense. Aaron continued, they had a very special connection, really, really strong, and they were always finding ways to do nice things for others. As the story unfolded, it became clear that Arakiwa's family, while mourning her loss, had chosen to keep most of their thoughts and feelings private. Still, they wanted to acknowledge Hackman's family and show compassion. The family here doesn't want to say much right now, said Chris Fitzhenry, who represents the family in Hawaii, in a brief statement given to the Daily Mail. They are still going through their grieving process, and it's very hard on them. He added, of course, we send our sympathy to Gene's children and to the rest of his family. But right now, this is something very personal. It's a private time for everyone. It's possible that Betsy Arakawa felt that by consistently taking care of her mother's financial needs, paying bills, sending money, and making sure everything was in order, she was fulfilling her duty from afar. Maybe she believed those practical gestures spoke louder than words, or that they would be enough until she had the time or space to reconnect more personally. Perhaps she had plans to visit, to call more often, or to make things right in the way only time and presence can offer. But life, as it often does, may have gotten in the way. Do you think the images and videos of Betsy Arakawa and Gene Hackman's mummified bodies should be open to the public? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.